Okay, we can start our board meeting. So I'm going to call it to order at 7:06. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence for all of our stakeholders, principals, everybody that's in our system. And at this moment in time, there's a huge fire, another huge fire in my area. We're using our high school for refuge there. Dr. Finch's wife is actually hanging there right now. So let's think about that. And if I seem a little bit distracted, I'm in the midst of also housing animals for people. So with that, take a deep breath and we will get this meeting going. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Adoption of the agenda, Mrs. O'Brien. Oh, let me hit mute.
If you just give me one moment, I need to find the items for the two principals.
Those would be action items C and D, 6C and D that need to be moved.
Thank you. I move to.
You're welcome.
I move to adopt the governing board agenda with the exception of moving 6C and 6D to just after 2B.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, have we all voted on that? Okay, so everyone voted on that. And what was my, oh, okay. So we would have governing board reports. Let's start with Mrs. Reed.
I'll make it very quick tonight. I just wanted to say thank you to all of the students and parents and community members who contacted us regarding graduation. I apologize.
All right, Julie, we can't, or I can't hear you now. And
with a lot of the emails that parents were assuming that we were voting on this as an action item tonight, and we are.
Okay, I have poor service. Okay, so let's move to Ms. Tweedy.
I was going to be brief as well. I just had a few things. I know, I just wanted to clarify a few things because this is our first WebEx meeting. I know when the invitation went out, it said 7 to 10. Does that mean that this meeting automatically stops at 10? Not that I'm not hoping we're done, but.
No, it'll last as long as it needs to last, but I'm pretty sure it will last as long as we need to get our business done properly.
Okay, that was just my concern because I do know graduations is on as a discussion item. I received a lot of emails as well, and I wanted to make sure that when we got to that item, we had time to discuss, give it the attention it deserves as a board and discuss it. And I just wanted to thank all the community members that have emailed the board about high school graduations. To let you know, I did read all of your emails. I didn't have time to respond to all those emails, but I do look forward to discussing this tonight. And I do want to clarify, the board is not voting on it. It's not an action item, it's a discussion item, but the board can express their opinions to the superintendent about high school graduation. So that's the purpose of the item. But thank you to everyone who emailed me, and I did take the time to read all of those emails.
Ms. Frank?
I have not had time to respond personally to each email, but I have read all of the emails, and that's it for my report.
Mrs. O'Brien, thank you.
Thank you, President Ordway. First of all, I would like to thank our IS&T department for their, and for our district office staff, especially Mrs. Taylor, for your Herculean efforts to get this meeting to happen virtually on somewhat short notice. So thank you very much. Your efforts are greatly appreciated to help us do this meeting in this format. And like my fellow board members, I've received and read all the emails regarding graduation, have not had time to respond to them. I look forward to that discussion. I know these are very trying times, and it's frustrating kind of doing this back and forth. But again, thank you to everybody that is working hard to make sure that we move forward in a safe manner for our students, our staff, and our community. Thank you.
All right, I also have read the many emails, texts, and a few phone calls. The discussion will be thoughtful discussion, and we won't, as usual, we don't rush through anything. Making sure that whatever the direction that each of us goes, or as a collective board, that it will be in what we have been able to gather as being in the best interest of our students. Also, just one more time, our school district, the Boulder Creek region, especially at this point in time, has been housing and helping the fires up in that area. New River Elementary has opened up the parking lots and the well for them, and now Boulder Creek also is opening up. So thank you to the staffs of those schools for helping in these trying times. We do have quite an evening filled with information on COVID. So when Gary gets to his report, I think there's going to be a lot of pertinent information and clarification for some of the things that we asked for. So reading and listening and making sure we're taking notes on that, because this stuff has changed daily. The experts agree on one thing, it's bad, and then after that, some of it is the same and some of it's not. So these decisions that are made by us and also by our staff are very well thought out with the information that we have, knowing that the plans that we make can change on a dime when some new information is given. So Dr. Finch.
I'll let me get the sound there.
I'm good.
Wait.
Want me to shut mine off?
Yeah. We're getting a little feedback here. Just a second.
Okay.
All right. Just mine will be short as well. Just received notice today. We being summoned by the governor again to meet with them and some other superintendents. Obviously, we're running out of time as school approaches here soon. And so looks like the legislature is going to have their troubles trying to get things done. So I'll be talking with the governor tomorrow. I'll actually know a little bit more, give it to you in a Friday update on the things that I learned. And most of it I've already told you in a Friday update. And so we'll just see if my predictions or direction was correct or not. I'll find out that tomorrow. So on a Friday update or a Thursday update, I'll keep you in the loop on that. And again, thanks to our staff that are responding up north. I know Sunset Ridge is involved, and Boulder Creek High School is helping out, and then obviously Anthem Elementary. So thanks for the community rallying. That's what your local public school is all about, helping your community. And so it's nice to be an integral part of the system up there as we try to help our neighbors. And yes, Mrs. Finch is not at home because she's in the evacuation loop. So hopefully I have a house to go to after this meeting. If not, I might be, whoever's the best cook, I might be moving in.
I have empty room and
I have room in the chicken coop. Great. All right, so let's move on to our COVID-19 update.
Mrs. Ordway, it's time for the principal recommendations. We modified the agenda. Right, is that okay? Okay, I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the principal of Gavilan Peak to be Ryan Plutnick.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's 5 ayes, 0 opposition, and I don't know if Jenna wants to spring her virtual can of welcome to Gavilan Peakness. Are you there, Jenna?
Yes, I am here. We are very happy to welcome Ryan Plutnick as principal to Gavilan Peak. Ryan currently is the assistant principal at Highland Lakes, and he formerly was working in the Anthem area at Boulder Creek High School. So he's very familiar with the community. He's thrilled to be joining it, and we look forward to having him as the new principal at Gavilan Peak School.
Great. Mrs. O'Brien?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the Deer Valley Online Program Small School K-12 principal of Shelley Schubert.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes? Everyone's done voting?
Okay, so we'd also like to share with everybody that Shelley Schubert has worked in the Deer Valley Unified School District for quite some time in many capacities. Currently, she serves as the assistant principal at Sierra Verde, but after this vote, I guess actually, she serves now as the principal of our new online school, which will serve to assist all of our students that choose to enroll online during this new and unique time moving forward for the 2021 school year. Shelley has a vast background and a strong capacity to take on this challenge, so we're excited for her.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. O'Brien?
Now we would go back to the COVID-19 update from Dr. Zurbach.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. It is our pleasure to continue providing the COVID-19 updates. This is our second update for the month of June. And just so you know, President Ordway, I am looking at the screen behind me, so I'm kind of having to go two ways here as we're progressing through. Okay, as for tonight's agenda, we first have 2 sunshine stories to share. After our sunshine stories, we will provide updates from the return to school work teams. Third, we have a handful of department updates, and then that will conclude our formal presentation for tonight. Okay, for our first sunshine story, Dr. Miller and Jamie Fitzpatrick received this amazing email from an O'Connor parent. It is a great testimonial to CTE students that are both college and career ready. I will read this to you. Hello, I am writing to express my appreciation for Miss F, is what I'm going to say, and the CTE Design and Architecture program she leads at Sandra Day O'Connor High School. As part of the CTE program, Lexi earned a Chief Architect Apprentice Certificate and passed the AZ Technical Skills Assessment for Interior Design and Merchandising. Lexi also earned 2 scholarships directly related to her involvement with this program. She has received both the ASU William Smith Jr. Scholarship for Architectural Students and the Association for Career and Technical Education of Arizona Student Scholarship Award. She will be majoring in architectural studies in the Barrett Honors College. She will be a student there next year at ASU. There is no doubt that Lexi is going to be well prepared for this opportunity, given the 3 years she was able to spend in the CTE Design and Architecture program. I sincerely appreciate all of the time Ms. F spent inspiring, instructing, and mentoring Lexi, as well as the time she spent writing letters to support her. So this, again, is just a testimonial to the great things that our staff is doing here at Deer Valley. Thank you. We also had 2 Mountain Ridge High School students receive the ACTE Arizona scholarships. Only 22 students statewide win these scholarships, so it was great to see that 3 Deer Valley Unified School District students to earn them. Heather, could you try on yours? Give us just a second, having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Okay, thank you. Okay, our second sunshine story comes from Mr. Miglerino.
Good evening, governing board members, Dr. Finch. I just wanted to share a couple pictures of the construction projects that we continue to work on. On the left-hand side of the screen are pictures of the Union Park School. Construction continues with some zest as we're trying to finish up here between now and the end of the month. And was at the school again late this afternoon. They're finishing the floor up in the gym. A little hard to see the far left picture. Out in the distance, the field is starting to show some signs of turning green as we're waiting for the grass to come up. But you can see in the bottom picture, some of the landscaping is, especially on the interior, is being completed, really cleaning up the site and getting to a more finished state. The right-hand side happens to be pictures from the traditional school at Bel Air. You can see the front of the school is really starting to take shape with the upper picture. The lower picture actually shows the fire line that is being installed. That is a loop that goes around the entire campus. So quite a bit of work happening there. When I was there this morning, they've already started on some of the parking lot improvements as well. So we continue to make a great deal of progress despite all the challenges that we're dealing with. It looks like those projects are continuing to progress. And so we're excited about the opportunities to open up these campuses for next year.
Similar to our first meeting in June, the centerpiece of tonight's COVID-19 presentation is again the updates from the Return to School work team. We will begin this section with a reminder about what this team has been charged with doing. Again, as it states in the slide, the purpose of these teams are to draft the operational plan for the 2020-21 school year. There are 3 guiding principles that each team is using to draft their guidelines, and those principles are as stated there: safety, both for students and staff, that is student-centered, and that the items that are listed are sustainable, feasible, and scalable. As for our first sub-work teams update, that will come from Dr. Galligan and the Return to School Learning work team.
The 3 models that you see in front of you, Dr. Galligan is not available at the moment. So obviously we have our home campus regular learning, and the one on the far right. These are the 3 models. The one on the far right is the one that we traditionally use, our DVLOP and those kinds of models that we've always used at Deer Valley Online. And the middle one was the one that you approved today for the online principal. And that one there will be, it's the one that we're working on right now. That's the asynchronous model that is on the same path and same pace as the regular brick and mortar. And they will have points, different points, probably at the 3-week mark is what we're thinking, where kids can come in and out. And obviously, as the regulations and updates from the state change by the minute from the county as well, we will need some kind of model that will be a little more flexible. So that was the idea behind it. And this is very similar, as I've shared with you before, the NEVIC principals, our superintendents, that's our 8 brothers and sisters that are similar size to us. We meet weekly, and most all of them are all doing the same models, these 3. And so one, obviously brick and mortar, we think will have the most kids in it. And our online will be families that want to just be online for the whole year or be at semesters and want to do that. We already have a ton of students already doing that. It's a very robust program that we've built there. And so the one that will be the most exciting and new will be this flex model. So that's what the slide is showing here. I don't know if Dr. Zurbach knew that Dr. Gallen was not going to be available. So
yeah, sorry about that, Dr. Finch. We had some technical difficulties. We actually could hear Dr. Galligan here in the main boardroom, but you could not hear her there, I guess. So she was talking when you were talking too for a bit. But we're going to move on to return to school safely as we're having some technical difficulties, obviously. Okay, so some of our slides are not able to move right now, so I'm going to continue with the next sub-work team. That is the Return to School Safely. That work team is chaired by Mr. Miglerino and myself. The recent work from this team has focused on the stakeholder committee. Almost 250 parents submitted a Google form application to serve on this important committee. We are truly fortunate to have this number of folks that would want to express their desire to participate. Given that we had such a large number of parents that wanted to participate, we are going to modify the format of the initial meeting, and we will offer an opportunity for all of them to provide feedback on the on-campus experience overview document, as well as the parent survey. We want to know from parents which parts are clear and which parts need additional clarification before an entire parent population sees it. We also want to gather their general input regarding the balance of normal school along with the specific safety protocols that will need to be in place. In addition, we would like the committee to preview the survey that will be scheduled to go to the parents this Thursday afternoon and receive feedback on which edits will be necessary to the survey. 2 subsequent meetings will be held with the members of the stakeholder committee in early and mid-July. Our second bullet point speaks to PPE, and with that, Ms. Mock will take it.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. We didn't put any more information than these couple of brief bullets in here this evening because all the way up until right about the time we came to the board meeting, we were putting in place the purchase orders and making the orders for materials that we believe we'll need to start the school year. And our plan is to have face masks and face shields for every staff member and student who choose the on-campus model. We will have a combination of cloth face masks so that folks will have them to take with them and bring back. And we will also have disposable masks for those of us who tend to forget things from time to time and maybe show up without them. In addition, we will have certain positions that will have face shields instead of the face masks because we know it's going to be important for the students to see faces. And those include teachers in younger grades, special education, staff members and paraprofessionals, and I think that's it for those. And we'll have extras for any staff who need those or prefer those to masks as well. In addition, when it comes to sanitizers, we have more than just hand sanitizer, but at this time we're planning on starting the school year with half-gallon hand sanitizers for every classroom and some common areas as well. In addition, facilities continues to work on the portable hand sanitizing stations with 5 for each campus and 10 for high schools, as well as the hand sanitizer dispensers that go on the walls. Sanitizing also comes in the form of making sure that we have sanitizing spray available for every classroom so that desks and chairs can be wiped down. And facilities is preparing to send 75 kits, basically. So spray bottle that will house disinfectant, appropriate labels and triggers. 75 to every campus, and high schools will actually be receiving 225 of those. And we also have some orders of gloves on the way. We don't have any specific numbers of gloves, but we will be surveying staff to make sure that what we are planning are going to meet their needs and see if there's anything else. In addition, we're going to provide them with the information needed in order to be able to keep these items coming and replenish any of the items they have once they dispose of the original quantity. And we just actually sent this out to staff at about 6:30. And what we told them was this is going to, as this continues to change and recommendations continue to change, we will continue to change, keep updated the items that we are providing them. And we ask them to stay flexible, and we're going to stay as quick to respond as we possibly can.
Ms. Mock, I have been reading on different social medias, getting a couple of texts, and then reading things from different districts where staff members, specifically teachers, are concerned that they are going to have to be providing these masks and sanitizers. So what you're saying is that we are providing all of these PPE materials that are necessary. So could you just maybe restate that one more time?
Correct. We don't want PPE to be a reason that a staff member or student doesn't come to school. We're prepared to provide it for anyone who wants to be on campus and have the brick and mortar education experience. We placed the order actually at about 5 o'clock this afternoon. We expect some of the supplies to start arriving as early as next week, and we believe we will have them in stock before school starts.
Thank you, Ms. Mock.
Just one more. I'm sorry, Gary. Well, you were turned around anyway, so I'll ask Heather why you were turned around. So if at this moment in time, what we're planning is staff and students will be required in a brick and mortar situation to have masks, and we will be providing these masks in one shape or another. Is that correct?
Yes, President Ordway. So again, just to reiterate what Ms. Mock said, that we intend to provide for any student that is not bringing his or her own facial covering, that we will have the PPE facial covering for that student. So it'll either be a facial cloth covering that we will have, and we will also have single day mask, I believe Ms. Mock as well, that we would have for our students. As for the actual requirement of the mask, Ms. Ordway, I think that's part of your question too. So what we can say for sure now is that in any instance, if social distancing is not possible in the classroom, and I say that because President Ordway, it is partially contingent right on how many parents decide to come to brick and mortar versus go to online. But in situations when social distancing of the 6 feet is not possible, then the expectation will be that students are masked up.
And we would be following all of the requirements of county and city that our schools sit in, or how will we do that, since we have so many different areas?
Yes, we plan to follow as we know, all of our schools are located under the jurisdiction of Maricopa as well. And so we do plan to follow the guidelines that are in place there.
Thank you. Anybody, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but I don't know how better to do it with this format. So is there anybody else that would like to, that has some clarification questions now?
I have two. Is it okay to ask my questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question I had was on the last slide where you showed the 3 school models. And the question I had was the flex model where it says you start online, then you transition to a school. Does that mean every student enrolled in that program would have the same transition date, or is that for parents who are requesting online for X period of time, but that could look different for different parents? So I guess that's what I'm asking.
So President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, Dr. Galligan is on the call now, so I think we should be able to hear her. So I'm going to defer to her first for this, and then if we can't hear her, I will jump in with some information about the designated entry points in the 3-week intervals, which I think is what your question is, Ms. Tweedy. Dr. Galligan, are you able to join us at this point?
I am, and I apologize. I had the wrong link. President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, of the 3 models, the return to learning on Flex really is attached fairly closely to our on-campus model. So this would be a program that parents would select for a short period of time. It would work on 3-week intervals. So if I had a child and I was concerned about them starting the year off in their on-campus environment, but I knew that eventually I wanted them to be back on an in-person campus, then I would start in return to learning on Flex. We would want to have students exit into an in-person campus at those 3-week intervals. So if at the end of 3 weeks, a parent said, you know what, I think the schools have it right and I feel my child will be safe, I'm going to move them back to their home campus, they would have that opportunity. So the On Flex really is that short-term program to help parents either start the year off there, or let's say somewhere down into the first quarter, a parent felt that they needed to have their child for another short period of time online, they would move into the OnFlex program. And the uniqueness about this particular program is that the teachers who teach OnFlex will be on the same pace and scope and sequence as their brick and mortar partners. That's because the kids really are still attached to their home campus and will flow back and forth as needed. But the goal here with the OnFlex really is to provide that opportunity and that choice for parents who are just not sure yet, but want their kids back at their home campus as quickly as they can.
Okay, so to differentiate, if they're in the OnFlex program, they're still registered at their home school. If they're registered in the online program, they're no longer attached to their home school?
Ms. Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, that is correct. The Deer Valley Online Academy is its own program, and it will be more asynchronous than synchronous, and it will run at its own pace. So it truly is an online type program where we would not want children floating back and forth between the online academy and their brick and mortar school. So the goal here is that at the K-6 level, parents would remain in the online academy for at least the first quarter, and at high school or secondary would remain for the first semester. Again, this is a long-term option, and it really is that full-time online experience that particular model is providing for parents who would like to have that.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question was regarding the face mask, face shield presentation. I just wanted some clarification. What I heard, and I know this can't actually be what we're doing, so I just want clarification, and maybe we don't know yet, is we're providing cloth and or disposable mask to all students and employees. We have 30,000 students, and if they chose disposable, that would be 7 masks per 30,000 students. So I want to clarify what the limitations of the providing of masks look like.
Sure, President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, Ms. Mock is going to join in for that part and provide some additional clarification. And Ms. Mock, you may want to add just a quick comment regarding the previous question about the enrollment and the attachment of the students to the sections, just clarifying that's a complex matter. We're working through some of that as well.
Yes, Ms. Tweedy, I'll start with the PPE and the masks for students. I think what we're looking at and considering to start with is almost like the school ID. We're going to provide you with one reusable one that you can take home, you can launder, you can bring back on a regular basis. We would only provide the disposable mask if by chance you forgot your mask that day. And the same would be true for transportation and for anyone who chooses busing. The goal is to have that, the cloth mask that you can bring back on a regular basis. And I think we'll probably all get used to it, and we get used to it's just something like your lunch that you bring with you every day. We hope that's the case. Yes, we're definitely not ordering 70,000 disposable masks. We're looking at a much, much smaller quantity. Maybe each classroom has a box of 50, and for any kiddo, or maybe the front office, the front desk, and each bus. And then as a kiddo comes into the classroom or on the bus and has forgotten theirs, they will get that disposable to use for the day. But anyone who needs a cloth mask will receive it that they can use on a regular basis. Correct, they can take it home, they can bring it back, they can take it to the store, they can use it wherever they need. We will have additional, and I think that's part of what we're still working out is how many additional we will have. We think that schools may want to even have masks with their logo on it that they could sell. High school bookstores, certainly that's something they could sell as a swag for the school. And I think some may already have some made. So I think we've got a lot of different opportunities to make sure that our students have them without actually buying, 70 to 100,000 to 200,000, right? I agree, Ms. Tweedy. If we were providing a cloth mask per day or a disposable mask every day for 180 school days, we would not be able to afford that at all. But we are working on that. When it comes to enrollment, I will just Dr. Zerabach said it correctly. We are working with IS&T, and there are some complexities about enrolling a student in the Bridge program and also keeping them in their homeschool. And we are working on what we can do to make sure they stay connected to their homeschool without breaking the system and making sure that everything gets to ADE correctly so that we can still get funded for them.
President Ordway, would you like me to continue on, or are there additional questions you would like us to entertain at this time?
I'm looking and I see that Ms. Frank has one, and I think Mrs. O'Brien also.
Hi, so my question is, how do you anticipate handling staffing with students moving from online into brick and mortar? That's a much more fluid situation. So you could potentially have, at the 3-week mark, a large number of students moving from online to brick and mortar. So what are your thoughts on how to handle staffing issues and class sizes?
President Ordway, Ms. Frank, if we could just pause on that. Ms. Moffitt's section on return to work is going to get into some of that. And so that will come in a slide that's just about to come. If we could just pause on that for a moment, and then we can certainly come back to that, if that would be okay.
Absolutely.
Ms. O'Brien?
Ms. O'Brien, and then Mrs. Reed, are you still out there?
Dr. Zerabach, I'm not sure if my question is appropriate for now or maybe in Mrs. Moffitt's section.
I think Julie's gone.
I'm curious about the staff members who are working now and the requirement for masks right now. So is that appropriate here or later?
I think President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, why don't we just go to Ms. Moffitt's section, because yes, that is an HR item that will be covered here in return to work safely. And then I think we can answer any more questions that are not covered already in her slides.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Ordway, governing board members. The Return to Work Safely Committee has been working diligently. As you are aware, we sent an email out over the weekend in response to requirements put forward by our local cities and Maricopa County. And specifically, that was the requirement that all of our employees who are working now and working in the future, unless a different recommendation comes down in future weeks, will be required to wear face coverings when they are not working alone. So I know that you received a copy of that email. And then additionally, yesterday, we conducted a workplace training for all site leaders because we have a good not majority, but a good amount of our workforce is active now. And our supervisors need training on setting up the work environment in a COVID type environment, how to set up a work environment for social distancing. They needed direction on workplace behaviors and workplace expectations as far as social distancing was concerned. They needed clarification regarding the face covering requirements. People working in different environments all across our district. We have some workers who can walk into an office and shut the door and take off a mask, while others work in cubicle environments that might be too close to other people that they're working with. And so those supervisors were given some suggestions regarding putting their employees on a work schedule that allowed for social distancing, and also discussed the requirement of wearing a face covering during that time. And remember, face covering is all-encompassing. Someone could wear a mask. Someone could choose to wear a face shield. Also, expecting employees to wear face coverings invites all other types of things that human resources has to consider. So, for example, ADA requirements or ADA needs or accommodations. There are situations when employees would have a disability that would not allow for them to wear a face covering. So we were prepared for such situations, and we are well versed in the ADA process and are working with those employees. We're also working with employees who are anticipating returning. They're not currently on contract, but they know that some of these requirements coming down the pike are going to potentially be problematic for their disability. Additionally, if you read many of the guidelines that came forth from Maricopa County or City of Phoenix or other cities, stated in those proclamations that someone could choose not to wear a face covering for a religious purpose. So excuse me for 1 minute or a second. So we are also prepared in those situations for any employee that felt or believed that they would qualify under that reason. We have a process in place and are working with those employees that feel that they cannot do that for those reasons. So again, the work team, it was prepared, and we are working through all of those specific circumstances. Additionally, I want to point out that we are very careful in following CDC guidelines, and we are routinely having conversations with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health because, as you're aware, circumstances have changed, and we have been managing COVID-19 active cases within our workforce since we originally shut down in March. We have had employees who unfortunately have come down with the virus and have been managing recovery with the virus. Now that we are opening and with the sunset of 2910, we no longer, moving into July 1st, have the options that we did have previously, as far as all employees continuing being paid, whether they are working from home, working on site, or not working and just being available on call. So we had to prepare and move quickly into training all of our supervisors and communicating with all our employees like we did yesterday on what their future options are. So essentially we're looking at 2 options with on-call no longer being one of them. So working at home is a framework that we have had to work diligently on, and the other one, of course, being on-site work. So in preparation for moving our employees into these different frames, we're going to be sending out a staff survey later on this week. And the intention of this survey is to learn as early as possible where staff believe they're going to need to be. So we will have some staff that commit to be prepared and ready to return to a brick and mortar setting. We also know that some of our employees could have underlying disabilities that potentially could qualify them for ADA accommodations and cannot return to the brick and mortar setting. And as the employer, we may agree that that is indeed true, and it's necessary that we consider moving those employees to an at-home work option. We also, in that staff survey, are prompting our employees if they are currently in a COVID situation, usually as outlined in the FFCRA, those 6 items that are listed in the materials that I sent you yesterday, if you had an opportunity to look at those. If one of our employees is navigating a situation in one of those 6 areas, and they themselves are not sick, and they do have the option to work from home, we have a process to review to determine whether or not that is a viable option for that employee, for that specific job, and for that specific supervisor, to see if we can flip that person onto an work from home option. So again, a COVID-related reason could cause someone to work at home, a workplace requirement, for example. I shared with you earlier that we've asked our supervisors to take a look at their work environments. There are going to be times when we just can't have everybody in the building at the same time. and be able to socially distance at the same time. And I'm not referencing a classroom when students are coming in. I'm more referencing where we currently are today and our cubicles and workspaces. And then again, the ADA accommodation. We spoke about PPE. Heather did a very nice job walking you through where we are with PPE. I just want to reiterate that we have taken some extensive time to look at positions across our organization. We have spoken with our employee association groups, and since late May and early June to discuss roles in this district that may need different types of PPE. And face shields came up as a common solution to not only ADA concerns, for example, someone who may be symptomatic of asthma and has difficulty wearing a face mask could easily shift over to a face shield. And as you can imagine, if you're a speech pathologist and you're working on articulation with a student, the student's need to see your mouth is very important. And so a face shield would be necessary in situations such as that. We have checked, and currently it's still satisfactory with Maricopa and the CDC. A face shield is as acceptable as a mask right now. That does not change, though, that we do have to identify specific jobs where certain PPE is going to be necessary. We have received attorney guidance on walking through those situations and identifying those jobs. For example, someone that is working with bodily fluids, or their job is to work with bodily fluids, like changing diapers or working with feeding tubes or changing a Band-Aid, a little child that's come off the playground with an injury. It would be safe and appropriate for the person managing that student or that situation to wear not only a mask, but perhaps a shield as well. So we are looking across our jobs right now to determine who needs which options. And lastly, regarding PPE, we are evaluating the storage options for all of those things. So recommendations at least. So you all know that, or maybe you don't, that a disposable mask will last you, or paper mask will last you approximately 2 days. So it's important that we provide that type of information to our employees and to our families, that they know that that is their choice, their option, that they need to recycle those and get a new mask. We also will be providing recommendations regarding the washing of masks. We know that most people will likely want to bring their own PPE. Now that we're all wearing them, you've probably personally tried a few and noticed that maybe the first one didn't work out very well. And it takes some time to figure out what fits you best and what you feel you can live with during the day. And we know that our employees and likely most of our students are going to want to come with one. And it is likely that it will be a cloth mask. So we do need to provide some recommendations regarding storing those and washing them so that they stay safe. Now, regarding staffing, that is a branch off of the staff survey. Again, we're requesting that our employees, and I do want to let you know too that I'm meeting regularly with this work team, and in addition to this work team, the executive board of DVEA has given us a lot of great time on a weekly basis to hash out some of these items. There's a lot to consider and a lot to think about, and they have put forward some really great ideas as we are thinking about what we are going to do moving forward with a lot of different things. One of those is staffing. This is going to be, it is going to be complicated. So later in today's meeting, I'm going to share with you the MOU that we are going to hope that you will approve, because it will assist us with quick rebalancing of staffing based on where our students enroll. So that we will be sending out the parent survey later this week, as well as the staff survey. The intent of the parent survey is hopefully to gain some insight of where parents believe they're going to be enrolling their children, whether it be brick and mortar, in the flex, or fully online. once they begin to commit there, we'll have a better idea of where our students are going to be, and we can quickly begin to move our staffing around accordingly. So once we know how many online positions we are going to need, if you recall, one board meeting back or two, we talked a little bit about ADA, that there are going to be employees we first do need to put into these positions based on ADA needs. And then we will be moving people or our staff members into these positions based on surplus. And in the meantime, we are in informal discussions, making some decisions here pretty soon, quite quickly, to determine whether or not we will allow for internal movement based on preference or voluntary transfer rather than involuntary transfer. And if we decide to do that, it's going to be something that we do in the next couple of weeks. So I think I have covered everything on that slide, as well as answered Ms. Frank's question regarding staffing. In full candidness, Ms. Frank and Ms. Ordway, it's going to be, it's not going to be perfect on day one. Not meaning student day one, although even student day one, as you know, on a normal year, it takes time for us to see where the students are and to readjust our staffing. We are expecting to need to adjust staffing far more than we have in years past because of the COVID situation. So we have a plan. Now it's just a matter of navigating that. I do want to mention too that we are working on a pool of substitutes. We have contacted our substitute pool. Right now we have over 20 people that have agreed at this point to begin with us on day one. We have already identified our employees that will be out on maternity leave or other leaves, and we are putting substitutes into those positions. We are now aligning substitutes with vacancies, and then our next move will be to prepare substitutes to move into positions that we are not yet aware that we are going to need. We also are in discussion about training these substitutes because there's potential for those subs to need to transition to an online environment just as our teachers are going to need to be prepared to do the same. And I recall Ms. Ordway mentioning that she would like an update on what we are doing to train our staff on the online modules in anticipation that the governor may choose to shut down, or we may need to clean an area and transition into a shutdown for a short period of time. And so Dr. Galligan is working with her team to prepare a training module for those who will begin online, more extensive training, and then also a training for our pre-service days for all staff to move through. And that we hope will also include our substitutes.
Jenna, did you need to say something?
Dr. Galligan, if you would like to add anything regarding the training for our teachers that are going to be teaching the flex model, the bridge model, and also preparing substitutes that are going into vacancies for the same.
Absolutely. So for any of our teachers who will be new to online instruction, whether it is the flex program or the online academy, we will have training built into the week of July 13th, specific to those two potential groups. Then we also have training built in to July 23rd and 24th. And that training is open to all staff in the district. It will be virtual, and there will be multiple options for teachers to participate in. And both of those would include our substitutes, our interns, and any other educators. And then during pre-service days, the trainings that we've done previously for July 13th week or July 23rd or 24th will also be utilized for all teachers during our pre-service days. And the main reason for this, as Jenna mentioned, if Governor Ducey does indeed at some point during the school year put us into school closure again, all of our teachers will need to be able to pivot quickly into that online model, which would look different than home learning did in the spring. And we are building that particular model out right now. But that one won't be really needed unless something were to be called for our school closure again. So those are the initial PD plans, and then just ongoing PD as we did in the spring. There will be ongoing PD weekly that teachers and others can choose to participate in. And then just depending if there comes a need for more, that would be provided as well. We have a very robust group of teachers in our schools who have offered their services. Of course, Michelle Coots and the folks that she works with have also been working on developing those different professional developments.
Ms. Tweedy?
Sorry if you answered this and I missed it. Is the flex model available for K through 12, or was that just certain grade levels?
Ms. Ordway and Ms. Tweedy, no, that is a K-12 program that really, as I mentioned before, is attached to the school as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Absolutely.
Dr. Galligan, when we were discussing the all online version earlier, my question that I was getting from some parents was if they are on open enrollment currently for the 2020-2021 school year and choose to do online this year, would they be able to go back to their open enrollment school, their home school, for the 21-22 school year? They don't want to lose their spot.
Ms. Ordway and Ms. Reed, I will defer to Ms. Moffitt on that, but I believe once a student has been accepted to the campus of open enrollment, then they are accepted on that campus until a natural transition occurs to whether it's middle school or high school. But Ms. Moffitt would be able to give you probably a more definitive answer there.
So yes, the intent is that wherever the student is now, whether it be their home school or the accepted open enrollment school, that is where we will consider them to be if they enroll in the bridge option. The technicalities behind that are what Ms. Mock was referencing, that we are trying to figure out how our systems support that. So for example, power schools, you can, what will power schools look like for that child? So it may cause us to need to build a back system and able to at least document where they started at the end of the year, and then they can move back once the bridge option, they are completed with the bridge option. But to answer the question directly, if they are there now, if they're open enrolled and accepted there now, that is where they reside.
And sorry, Ms. Moffitt, just for clarification, I understood about the bridge program or the flex program, but if they choose this year to go completely online, would they be able to then return the following school year back to their open enrollment school?
I will defer that question back to Gail. I'm not sure what the intent of the full online school was for this year. I believe currently they are attached to their school, even if they're enrolled there, but I'll let Gail answer that.
Ms. Ordway, Ms. Reed, again, I believe our open enrollment procedures are such that if a student has been accepted, they are accepted. This is an out of the ordinary year coming up. And if a parent feels that they want their child to have full online, which would be the Deer Valley Online Academy for the year, this would be something outside of what they would typically have chosen, I would imagine. And because of the unusualness of this year, I believe our open enrollment procedures would still support that parent being able to have their child back at the campus where they were open enrolled previously. again, if you would give us just some grace time to clean up any of those types of questions that might come up for any of the models, whether it is the Flex or the Academy.
Thank you so much.
I have one more question, Mrs. Ordway.
Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Galligan, the online option, that will be available for all of our students, K through 12?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, so I'm going to differentiate. The OnFlex program is the bridge between a short-term online program back into their in-person or on-campus school. The online academy is the long-term program. So I think when we say online, we just want to differentiate a little bit between the two of those.
So I'm curious about the online academy, the long-term version, and that will be, because we approved that, I believe, earlier in the summer to put in that waiver, or not a waiver, approval to have it for K-8. So I just want to ensure that, right, we're still moving forward with that. So if we have a kindergartner or second grader who parent want them online full-time, that is an option.
Absolutely. Both the Flex and the Academy are K-12 programs.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jenna, if you're done, I guess, Gary, are you continuing?
Yes. Thank you, President Ordway. So we'll continue now with a handful of department updates. So our wonderful athletic director, Scott Warner, he inserted some bullet points for you to update you on the state of athletics right now and our return to play operational plan. And so as you are aware through our board updates, we are in stage 2 for most of our sports and most of our schools. This still means we have very limited numbers of students that are together. So this is the cohorting model of no more than 10 participants. And as far as the face coverings, you can see in here that he put that with Maricopa County, it is the most restrictive one. But as the question was asked already about next year, that this year and in the summer right now, we did make the change effective on Monday for our student athletes. Because our coaches were already wearing masks, you'll recall that if the coaches were indoors, that was already an expectation by the district. And so the new expectation, though, is for our students, is that when they're indoors, even and our outdoor students as well, and that'll be on the next slide, that if the social distancing cannot be accomplished, that the student athletes would be expected to wear the mask. Oh, I also wanted to add the last bullet point there says stage 1, that we are monitoring the situation each day. We check with our coaches. Director Warner, he does go to all of the 5 high schools doing check-ins. And so if necessary, if the need were to arise to go back to stage 1, then we could do that. And so it's important that the board knows that. And so again, we are monitoring that. And so if that were to be the case, and then we would, of course, provide you that update. As far as the masks, again, this is just being repetitive at this point, but it is telling us that our coaches and our student athletes, that the expectation is that they do wear the facial coverings. And then as far as outdoors, because I know there's been a couple questions regarding that, if they are not able to social distance, then we are expecting that the student athletes would mask up. But by and large, the student athletes that are training outside, they are able to be socially distanced. And so that would be something where they would need to wear it at that point.
Gary, I just wanted a couple of texts to just reiterate the fact that when athletes are running, they are not required to wear a mask due to the fact that they would be socially distanced, correct?
President Ordway, yes, that's correct. As long as they are socially distanced, then they would not need to wear it.
Okay, thank you. Ann O'Brien, do you have another question?
Sorry. I'm trying to run more than one operation here. I apologize. So we've been providing the weekly meal distribution graph that you see here. You can see well over 20,000 meals over the last 2 weeks as well, which is consistent with the previous 2 weeks. But for the 12 weeks, now well over 422,000 meals. Because of the need that we're fulfilling, I wanted to show an appreciation for Director Chiarello and her staff. They did agree to extend the meal distribution. So the next slide actually has the particulars, slight adjustments to the locations that will, but the times are pretty much the same. We'll be providing meals through July 17th now. It says as of July 1st, that ends up being a Wednesday, so we're not serving until the following day, which is a Thursday, but 3 meals on Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, and Monday are served on Thursdays, Tuesday and Wednesday served on Tuesday, and that's breakfast and lunch. Again, we have a number of staff that are continuing to support this need for the community. Just wanted to recognize them for their effort.
So President Ordway, I would conclude by just reminding the board to make sure that they check our section in the board update this week, as we will provide some important information regarding the stakeholder committee meeting that is scheduled for tomorrow. And so we'll be able to provide some of that initial input from our parent population, and the initial meeting will have a large number of parents that will be able to listen to our presentation and provide some feedback. In fact, we will have the opportunity to possibly hear up to almost 250 of our parents as far as their input and some of their initial feedback on the ideas that you have seen both here today and in the on-campus overview document, which I sent to you yesterday via Vibe. So again, stay tuned. Look forward to the board update.
One more question from Ms. Tweedy.
So, Miss Moffitt had sent the board a list of procedures when we return to work, if someone's exposed, if, you know, a family member's exposed, if an employee tests positive. And I'm not trying to extend this conversation for hours, but I did have a lot of questions and concerns on that document. So I don't know if the appropriate thing is to request, maybe we could just have a separate COVID work session and discuss some of the COVID things that have been sent to us separately, or if I should be bringing them up now.
I'm gonna, at this moment, ask you to send all of those, any of us that have those questions, send them, and then we'll get it answered and put it into the agenda in some good spot with all the questions, so it can either be a report or whatever we need it to be. If the questions are from everybody or too much, then we can decide at that point if it needs to be a study session, a work session, or a spot on the agenda for the next meeting. Is that okay with everybody?
That's fine. I would probably prefer not to do it quite the way you're saying it, only because sometimes when I ask questions and they end up in the board update, they're not really written the exact way I've asked them, and I have no way to communicate with you guys about my concerns outside of a public meeting. So, right. But I do at the same time, I don't want to take over this item and extend it forever. So I'm trying to find the best way to communicate with you guys about this.
Right. So what I didn't want it for the answers to go in a board report, but I wanted any questions that we have about Ms. Moffitt's procedures is that we email them so Ms. Frank and I can figure out where in the next agenda it would fit. if it needed its own meeting or if it needs a discussion spot or a report spot. So it wouldn't just, your questions would not be, they could be addressed in the update, but that's not the final resting place for them. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I'll go ahead and I'll make a whole list of my questions and send them in.
Yeah, and as well as everybody else regarding specifically the procedures surrounding COVID and the processes and protocol that Ms. Moffitt sent out. Because even if we talked about it tonight, we wouldn't do it justice because all of the information wouldn't be available. So I think that if we send our questions in and we figure out where on an agenda it has its own space, then we can we can talk about it effectively and have complete answers. And remember to send them to Dr. Finch.
Mrs. Ordway?
Yes.
So I do want to have one more clarification from Mrs. Moffitt, or maybe just raise this point and it can be added to the list. But because I read all those protocols that they sent out, and I understand that when we're talking about staff that are in a department or at a school, how that will work. I want to ensure that we are also being concerned about the staff who move across our district. And so while they have a workplace, they spend a majority of their time in and out of our other buildings, like different maintenance people, as well as our IS&T staff. And that didn't seem to be specifically addressed in there. So I want to make sure that they know that we're thinking about them and that they're covered in that. Thank you.
So President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, I can reference to a degree, I think, Ms. O'Brien's question. I understand your request regarding not forgetting itinerant staff and some considerations for them. So we'll make sure that we note that. I just do want to point out, though, that all situations for them apply and should assist them as far as social distancing requirements, the wearing of the masks, the maintaining the 6 feet apart, assist you regardless of where you go. And contact tracing and all of the other things that we do make that, can make that a little bit more challenging if they've been many places around the district, but we do treat all of that uniformly. But I point taken, and we will add that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can, I believe the public comments are all an agenda item. So I think we're moving on to old business. Is that correct, Mrs. O'Brien?
Correct. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the advertising of the fiscal year 21 proposed expenditure budget.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Are we supposed to have a presentation first?
Well, I think this is old business unless there was something. Oh, I see there is one. Is there anything that changed, Ms. Mock, that you wanted to go over, or Mr. Miglerino? Yeah.
Madam President, members of the board, we did have a couple changes that I can review quickly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And just a reminder that we do have only until July 15th to get our budget approved for FY21. We can never spend any more than what we approve, but we always have the option to spend less if needed, as we did this year. We've had no changes to any of the proposed budget factors. Those all remain the same at this time. one, let me see how far forward I need to go. The staffing changes. One of the changes that we had in this presentation that we didn't have back on the June 9th meeting is that we're recommending an increase of classified staff. Previously, we had said 37 staff members, but we actually are recommending 38 staff members. And the difference for that, you will see here on the bottom bullet, the reduction of the copier maintenance agreement budget. Our current copier maintenance agreement plan with RICO includes a staff member that works for RICO but services just our copiers on site. The cost of that part of the agreement is increasing, and we don't believe we are receiving the benefit of the cost, and we believe we can do a better job and provide better service through our print shop at a little bit lesser of a cost. So that additional staff member that you see here on the bottom line is an additional staff member at the printing and graphics department, and the printing and graphics department would then pick up managing all of our RICO copiers on site. The other addition that we had, you actually already approved this evening, and when we come back to staffing, again, this looks like maybe we sent an older presentation, but we actually had, when we see admin increasing, that's going to be an increase of oh no, it's got its own bullet. That's what I did. Increase of 1.0 FTE admin for the online learning program, and you approved that staff member earlier this evening. So those two go hand in hand. Those were the major changes as far as the presentation. Mr. Migliorino did include, we don't want to leave him out. He does a great job of telling us what exactly how this will impact the tax rate and a couple of parcels in the district. Mr. Migliorino, did you want to review quickly the parcel examples that you included in the presentation as well?
Thank you. Just we added a couple slides from what was previously previewed. These are actual parcels. So we went back and looked at the assessed valuation changes and what the tax implications would be. And you can see it does vary based on the individual parcels. So there's 4 specific parcels that we've provided, parcel A, parcel B on this slide, and there's a parcel C and D on the next slide. And so it varies between 4.4% to 5.4% of an increase for those parcels. The majority of that is coming from the assessed valuation increase, so that the property value is increasing because the tax rate is relatively flat from comparing last year's to the proposed budget year. And so just those are the additional slides that we added to the presentation.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any more questions? I'm going to say I don't see anything. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so that was everyone. There was no one opposed. So let's go to 4B.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the 2020-21 extracurricular tax credit and fee authorization.
Second.
Are there any new highlights, updates you'd like to share with us, Mr. Migliorino? Oh, no, I'm sorry, Ms. Mock.
That's all right. We don't have any changes from the prior meeting. We are still recommending that the fees stay the same that they were the year for our 1920 school year. And just a reminder that by statute, this form, we are required by statute to waive for any student for which it's a hardship. So this approval that you give also gives the principals the ability and authorizes them to waive that fee for any student.
Okay, you did mean 2020, not 1920, right? I'm just kidding. And when you say 1920, you mean 1920 school year.
I said 1920 school year, yes. The fees are not changing from the 1920 school year. The 2021 school year will have the same fees as 1920.
Okay.
19-2020.
Boy, thank you for that perfect hindsight. Are there any questions? I see none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that's 5.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Was that everybody? All right, moving to, that would be 5-4, so there's 0 opposed. So let's move to 4C.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the Deer Valley Education Foundation Memorandum of Understanding for the 2020-2021 school year.
Do you want me to second that, somebody?
Second, I'm sorry, second.
That's okay. Do we need any further discussion on this? I think I see everybody saying yes. Did you want to go over it again?
No, I just was going to comment that there have been no changes from when it was previewed last meeting.
Why, thank you. Wow, that's a close-up. Anyway, nice mask. Since we have no questions, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Was that everyone? Are there any opposed? Alrighty then. Moving on to consent agenda.
I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items 5A through 5P.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, moving right along, that was 5 with 0 opposed to 6A, please.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the agenda as presented.
Second, sorry about that.
That's okay. Are there any questions on this? I see no questions. Darcy, you're not texting me a question, are you? No? Okay. So no questions. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, so there's 5. 6B.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the 2020-2021 Certified Staffing Adjustments Memorandum of Understanding.
Second.
Ms. Moffitt?
All right, President Ordway, governing board members, in anticipation of the various things we're going to need to do to adjust staffing this upcoming fall, we gathered the executive board of DVEA. We also discussed this proposal with NST language, and we're putting forward the MOU that you see attached. So here's an overview of what we have done with this particular section of the certified manual. So in the past, if you're not familiar with the process that we use when we're addressing staffing in the fall with our certified staff, and this is it, PowerPoint isn't moving. When we look at staffing, we look at the need to move staff in sections. So one of the adjustments that this group determined that they would make to that staffing is that when we did need to make a move at a grade level, that we would do it just at the grade level rather than at the grade level band. And the intent of this, thank you, Gary, is not to cause so many domino effects. When we usually do staffing in the fall, if we need to surplus a section, for example, from second grade because not enough students showed up at that grade, the current language states that we take the least senior staff member or certified staff member in the K-3 band, which may not be a second grade teacher. It could actually be a third grade teacher. And then that would cause this second grade teacher to go into a third grade. Or sometimes could cause a kindergarten to go to a first and then a first to go to a second and so forth. So rather to cause, again, all of those dominoes, the team agreed it would be more appropriate to look at the grade level itself. So should we need to surplus a second grade section, we will look just at the staffing at that second grade. We will move forward the same way, though. We will involuntarily surplus that staff member, the senior staff member at that grade, if a more senior person does not volunteer themselves. They always do have that option. So for example, if we need to move a staff member to the online program, we will notify the principal. Principal will have the conversation with that grade level. We also have a conversation with that grade level, determine which staff member it will be, and then determine what section is necessary for that staff member to move to. Could be another brick and mortar location, could be an online location. The team also decided that we would need a plan for transition back to brick and mortar. As you listened to Gail's presentation, you know that in that bridge option, students could be fluid back and forth. So there's potential that people become more comfortable. Wouldn't it be so fantastic if we found a solution to COVID and people felt more comfortable to move back to the brick and mortar? And that would mean that we would have less need online and might need teachers back in the brick and mortar sections. And so you'll see in that MOU, there is a plan for return. First, if the teacher that owned that section originally, so for example, if we surplused at second grade, Stetson Hills, then the teacher that held that position originally, if they were currently in online, could have the option to be the first to transition back over to Stetson Hills. If they did not want that choice, it then would be the least senior teacher unless a more senior teacher volunteered themselves to move into that section. And then lastly, the most important out of the really critical things to mention here is that when it is time to consider staffing for the 21-22 year, the request was that everybody move back to the original position control so that on paper, everyone is held harmless. So if you're currently a second grade teacher at Stetson Hills and we moved you somewhere else because of this MOU and because of the situation we are in under COVID, we will move you back to Stetson Hills in position control. If you're not familiar with that language, it's just a fancy way of saying that's what HR sees as your position in our system. And so when we staff, we will staff off of that instead. And so you will be considered to be back there for the 21-22 school year unless we need to make adjustments for the 21-22 school year. And then moving to the next slides, a couple of other things that you will see in that MOU is that we did add the 2 days that staff members already receive when they're moved from brick and mortar to brick and mortar locations. We will also provide the same 2 days, though the staff member may not need to actually physically move the classroom. They might be going to an online classroom. We will give them the 2 days to adjust, to onboard, and be prepared to roll with their new class. And then I also want to point out that sometimes number 3 causes confusion. That part of the language exists in current language, and we left it in the MOU language. It does not mean that those groups in number 3 are exempt from surplus. The reason that number 3 was written in the first place was not to confuse that group when we are surplusing, again, second grade or third grade. So, for example, a third grade teacher might say, well, I am actually not least senior because the PE teacher also teaches my students. So why are we not taking the PE teacher because the PE teacher is less senior than me? And so that's why that language was written, is just not to confuse that group in with the grade level. So if, in other words, if it was necessary for us to surplus in special areas or in PE, we would also surplus in those areas too. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood number 3, because sometimes that's a little bit confusing. And there are no changes to that. We left that in language. So any questions about the MOU?
And just a clarification, this was worked on with the DVEA, with the association?
Yes, the MOU was worked out with DVEA. The executive board participated in the development of it. Additionally, we then met with NST Language to further review, and actually NST, the 2 certified NST members that sit on language also sit on the executive board. So they got plenty of exposure. And then this was also looped to the administrative members of NST. They gave it their thumbs up. We put it on the official MOU memo, and that is what you see today.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Ms. Moffett, I know that we talked briefly about this last time at the last meeting too, but I know that we have a lot of teachers and parents that are watching, so I just want to go over it real quick. So if we have a teacher who has a medical condition, who cannot teach in the classroom, or who does not feel comfortable teaching in the classroom, are they allowed to volunteer to teach online first?
President Ordway, Ms. Reed. So as far as the MOU is concerned, the members that can volunteer themselves are those that have more seniority than the least senior teacher that otherwise would be surplused. Employees who need an accommodation because of a disability would need to go through the ADA accommodation process. And I do want to point out that that process is not the speediest process in the world. And so because we know this is going to be necessary in this current environment, we have put together a faster process for those that might need an ADA accommodation for this very reason. So to answer the question regarding the MOU, again, it is based on seniority. However, those employees that do need an online option and would like us to consider an accommodation under ADA for an online position, they have that option.
Ms. Tweedy?
I guess my request to this MOU and to follow up on what Ms. Reed said, I think our employees' health is more important than seniority in making these types of choices. So everything else here made sense to me, but I think we need to have a process where people who could produce medical documentation that they fall into the higher risk groups are placed into online positions first, because I really do think people's safety is the priority right now.
So Ms. Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, to reiterate, that is indeed what we have in place. All of those employees who feel that they need that option will have to follow the ADA process, as legally we do not have an option around that. Like you said, Ms. Tweedy, they would need to produce medical documentation to show that they do indeed have a disability. Once they have done that, we can move them into our online classes. They are our priority, and that is why we're sending out the employment survey, the employee survey later this week. We're specifically asking all of our employees to identify why they feel they may not be able to return back to the brick and mortar. And we provide options such as I have a underlying health condition, I have a disability that may prevent me from a brick and mortar option, and then of course they don't have to specifically disclose what those are there. It then drives them to contact HR, and it actually is going to ask them to leave their name with us if they wish at that time, so that we can contact them and invite them into a conversation and help them with whatever their specific need is.
So Ms. Moffett, I guess my ask here though, and I don't know how that fits with this MOU, is that all of those things are sifted through, vetted, and the online positions that are available are filled with those people that are in high risk groups before they're given to anybody with seniority. And you were saying that process can take time, but if those positions don't exist because they've been filled based on seniority, then there may be people in very high risk groups that don't have an at-home position available to them. And that's exactly what I don't want to happen here.
Ms. Ordway, Ms. Tweedy. So the way that it works is that we will solicit all of those people with underlying health conditions and a need for ADA accommodation first. And some of them we're already aware of. Those members, those employees will be staffed first. Now, once we have more positions, past the amount of people that we have staffed with underlying health conditions or ADA accommodations, then we can begin to staff them with surplus. But that doesn't mean that there are employees that have not yet come forward. It is possible that we will have already staffed with what we know, with who we know have a disability, then move into a phase of surplus, and then more people come forward who did not choose to come forward originally. And our hope is that we would have a position for them, but it won't necessarily guarantee that we would if they wait too long. And Ms. Tweedy, I'm talking about into August or into September, where we might not have.
Can we add that language? Can we add that language so there's no confusion to the MOU that the ADA accommodations requested by X date will be?
I would not recommend that we put it into language because it would, or it'd have to be very carefully written. Because it's, if not by a certain date, Ms. Tweedy, then that would make it an absolute, meaning that they wouldn't have the option in the future. And ADA guides how we do that, not an MOU. And ADA supersedes anything that we would put in an MOU.
Can I just say something, and then Ms. Frank? So what I'm hearing you say, Ms. Moffett, is that if you have sent your paperwork in and it has been decided, or your paperwork, your medical status says that you are in this group that can only teach from home, then you will be the first to staff the online positions when they come in. The other thing you're saying is that if we were to put a specific date to date in an MOU, then that more ties your hands not to be able to help those employees, or it renders it useless because ADA supersedes anything that we would put in an MOU. Am I getting it?
I think potentially renders it useless because there could be future needs still. We're anticipating a few cycles of adjustment. And so putting a date in place by which all ADA qualifiers would be staffed may not be a possibility. Again, because some people choose to come forward at a later date or don't even present a disability until a later date. Someone could have diabetes and not even know about it right now. They could have diabetes and be diagnosed with it in September, October, and then their doctor recommends that they, because it's so severe, recommends that they not be in a brick and mortar setting and request through us workplace accommodations. And if we, as the employer, go through the interactive process with them and determine that indeed a work from home option is necessary for them, we would need to have an option for them. We might, at that point, we may or may not have that option.
But ADA requires you to have a position for them.
No, it actually does not require us to have a position for them. Does it require us to add positions, to fund additional positions? We just happen to be in a spot now where we could offer that to many of our people that would need it.
Okay. All right.
So for example, in the past, obviously we have online, we're opening an online school, so we have some options, but should an employee come to us 4 years ago, we would not necessarily have been able to offer such an option to them, and by law would not have been required to either.
Okay, Ms. Frank?
Okay, so I think you've addressed the issue of underlying health conditions as a risk factor for COVID, but what I haven't heard is risk factors related to age. So for example, I know of several teachers that I used to work with who are now in the over 60 range, and the CDC guidelines are 60 and up. At one point, you should be in your house and stay at home. So if a person who is 60, age is not a disability. It's not a medical condition, but it still is not safe for those employees. So how do you plan to handle employees who maybe their only known risk factor is just their age?
Yeah, Ms. Frank, Ms. Ordway, that is definitely a challenging situation. And currently if an employee in that type of situation could apply to go into an online position, could volunteer themselves with more seniority to go into an online position. But you are right, it is not a disability, and should their doctor not diagnose them with a disability and the request, they could not go through the ADA process. They could, under the FFCRA leave, qualify if necessary for a certain amount of leave time. But outside of that, right now, we're in discussion about options around that. Right now, they would not qualify under ADA. That is something that we've been in discussion with Denise Wilbert about.
Well, you might assume that someone who's older might have more seniority, but that's not always the case. You might have teachers who maybe started their careers in their 40s, and there's other teachers who started their careers in their 20s who've been in the system longer. So I want to know that we are protecting the health of our older employees, because what are you going to do? Go to the doctor and get a diagnosis of being 60? But yet they are still at a higher risk, whether or not they have more seniority. So I want to know that we're going to be making these decisions, not just based on how many years you've worked for Deer Valley, but what your risk factors are for being in a brick and mortar classroom. I'm not comfortable with saying, well, okay, people with health conditions, they might be able to get something through ADA, but all these other folks who might have just as high risk or similar risks are kind of like, we'll help you out if we can. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's right.
Ms. Moffitt, did you say that you were working on something with Denise Holbert about that?
Yes, Ms. Ordway, we have been in discussions through ASPA with our peers. This is not unique to us, obviously. Same questions are coming forward with the other school districts. We do not have a clear identified solution for that particular scenario. And so, yes, we are in conversation, and Denise is supporting us in these efforts.
And with that can, however that gets worked on, that would be a separate, I don't know, MOU or something, but it would be separate unto itself?
Yes. There are going to be many things that we know are in the manual that we are going to need to be flexible or consider as a team with DVEA. This was the biggest one, and then as we sat down and we talked to one another, being this DVEA group that I meet with, we realized there are a lot of things. We have a running list of things right now that we know are going to be impacted in language because of how we're going to need to operate in our COVID structure. So Denise is actually working on a suggested perhaps proclamation, I'm not sure what she's going to call it, for the board to take a look at as far as giving us the options of moving forward quickly when we need to around potentially policy, potentially agreements. And then we would have a behind the scenes structure that you knew we were operating under. For example, this team that I work with, when we knew that something was going to need to be adjusted, or at least addressed, because we know the manual says one thing, but we don't feel that something agreeably, we feel that it's not something that we can pull off, that we would have that structure in place and bring it forward, and we could sign off on it and move forward. We're just anticipating. It's why she's drawing this up, and she's doing the same for other districts, because they're facing the same thing. Sometimes we won't even predict what we are going to face, and won't have the time to put a big MOU together like this.
So really, going forward, depending upon what the situation has come up, we can look for more of this. And I see you shaking your head, yes. So I'm going to Ms. Tweedy and then Ms. Frank have another comment.
I mean, I guess I'm just going to weigh in on this again, and I know my comments probably aren't going to make a lot of people happy, but I just got to say what I think is right here. I'm not prepared to support this evening. If you wanted to go back to the committee and put something in place that discussed risk factors over seniority and bring it back as risk factors being the first in placement and then seniority. And I even think risk factor would be the first in placement, even regardless of grade band. If there was a third grade high risk teacher, but a second grade opening, that she would be given that. But I would be more comfortable preserving or approving a memo of understanding that placed risk factors ahead of seniority in its language somehow, without tying your hands to do your job. And those are just my thoughts, but I wouldn't be prepared to approve this the way it's written currently. But if you wanted to go back and bring it back, but if there's 3 members that are okay with that, then my opinion may not matter. But those are my thoughts.
Ms. Frank?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge all of the work that was done by DVA and by Ms. Moffitt and NHR and all of the people who worked on this. So I do appreciate all of the work that was put into it. I'm not comfortable approving something on the chance that we're going to go back and come back with something else later. I need to see that our employees with risk factors that include their age, as well as possible medical conditions, are all protected and given the highest priority for an online assignment versus a brick and mortar assignment. I don't think this is the time to put seniority first. I think we need to look at the risk factors, all of the risk factors, not just the ones that would be covered under ADA. So that's my 2 cents.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have anything to add?
Well, I do think that Mrs. Tweedy and Mrs. Frank's comments are important, but I am concerned about the legal aspect of adding the things they've requested in at this time without receiving information from our attorney. Having said that, I'm not sure, how do I want to say, I think these are important, and the aspects that Mrs. Tweedy and Ms. Frank are talking about are separate, and we need to figure out how to deal with those separately in a legal fashion. And my concern is that if we delay putting this into place with school starting right around the corner, I think we're just about 4 weeks out-ish, or 5 weeks. I'm concerned about delaying this.
Mrs. Reed?
I too have concerns about just making sure our staff members are safe and they're healthy, especially because, I have a compromised immune system, so I understand if I was in the classroom teaching, still I would have some reservations myself. But I want to make sure that as a district, we can move forward to do the business of the district that we need to do. But I also want to respect and to make sure our other teachers are taken care of with in the two subsections that Mrs. Frank and Mrs. Tweedy discussed. Is there a way that we can do both? I know that we're waiting for some information from the attorney. Do we have to have that information and attach it to this MOU tonight, or can we approve the MOU tonight and then have a second one for underlying health conditions?
Ms. Moffitt?
I think that we could bring something back to you regarding underlying health conditions, and perhaps is a better option, because one, back to Ms. Frank's comment, an ADA accommodation is one thing. Identifying other risk factors is a whole nother ballgame. And those risk factors have remained fairly consistent as far as Maricopa County Health is concerned, and CDC, but they're subject to change. And so I think that it's worth having a legal review of what that would look like for us, and also would require employees to disclose age, and we would be taking age into consideration and making staffing decisions. And perhaps that's okay, but my gut says there's something a little bit concerning about that. So I would want to make sure that Denise took a look at that.
So, passing this tonight does not preclude us to go down the path to legally find out what we can do to ensure that over 60 underlying health conditions that would not, or that are not now covered under ADA, although they are covered under the FMLA that has to do with COVID. I don't remember the last letters in that. We could add to this to address those factors that are not addressed now due to the legal reasons that you're looking at.
We could.
That was awesome. And I see Ms. Tweedy and Ms. Frank.
So, Ms. Moffitt, could we ask our attorney? I heard all board members say that they agreed with our concerns. Could we ask our attorney if it would be advisable to add this language to this MOU, bring it back at the next meeting, versus writing a separate MOU that may contradict this MOU, because we haven't checked with legal about the ramification of approving contradictory MOUs.
I do want to point out that our intent is to begin staffing as early as possible in July. We hoped to be moving on staffing, which is why we brought it to this meeting rather than the meeting in July, before the meeting in July. If the board decides to pause on this and for our attorney to take a look, I do feel as though we could still move forward with all of those people that put forward their concerns through ADA as we already intended to. We could begin to staff the positions that way. But that would cause us to pause if we had more positions that we needed than we could fill through ADA. That would cause us to pause on moving forward with anyone that we would need to through the seniority process. And Gail intends to begin to train. Oh, Gary, what was the date? 16th of July? Somewhere around there, 13th, 16th of July, all of the online teachers. So just some timelines for consideration.
Well, what's the date of our next board meeting?
The 14th.
Well, could we get legal advice and call a special meeting to address this? I just want to make sure. I think I was told by other districts are placing by risk factors first, so I don't know why we can't.
Ms. Frank?
Sorry.
So just to follow up on a couple of Ms. Moffat's comments, I agree we would not want to look like there was an age discrimination or some issues with ageism going on. But in terms of asking people how old they are, isn't their birth date on their fingerprint clearance card? Because I'm pretty sure mine is. I mean, all you have to do is look at their birth date and figure out how old they are. Or people disclose that as a risk factor. And I haven't seen that the age categories, risk factors, since the beginning of this pandemic have changed. I don't think the guidelines on that are going to change. They've been really, really consistent. But to your point, Ms. Moffat, I do agree that we wouldn't want, there could be some legal ramifications for that might be considered age discrimination or something of that nature. But I don't think you have to ask people their ages. I think you already have that information.
You're correct. We do already have that information. I think a way around that perhaps is not seeking those people specifically. It might just be that we offer it up for people to come forward if they believe they are in a risk factor. And we could take a look at that. But again, we would get that advice from Denise.
Okay, so we have a motion before us. We also have an option to call a special session as soon as the legal opinion around the concerns that we're talking about are answered. But we have the opportunity to vote on the motion that's before us, and also to have a special session as soon as that legal opinion is arrived at. With Dr. I'm turning to you, Dr. Finch and Ms. Moffitt, knowing that the concerns that were brought up tonight would be questions that would be answered from that. And I'm sure that there are other districts that are doing the same thing. So, and I'm sure you're talking to them, but I'm going to call for the vote on this motion that's before us with the intent of having that special meeting as soon as that opinion comes in, so we can identify and make sure that we can include those employees as the other employees are moving along, to make sure that we're staying with the staffing.
Are you calling for the vote now?
Oh, calling the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, that would be 5 votes, 3 for, and 3 opposed. Or 2 opposed, excuse me, I can't count either. So let's go to our first preview. Item 7A. Jim? Is that correct? Yes. 7A is Jim.
I keep hitting the wrong button. I'm trying to run too many buttons here. I'll apologize for the echo. I think that's me sometimes. We have a preview item, so not an action item this evening for our tax anticipation notes. Annually, we seek this as a means to provide the cash flow necessary to fund the operating costs of the district. Because of the way the school year ended for the 2019-2020 school year, we ended up in a better cash position than previous years. So we did reduce the amount. We're asking for up to $35 million, although I don't believe that we'll need to issue that much. Preliminary numbers look like it could be closer to $30 million that we would issue in tax anticipation notes. For comparison purposes, last year for the 2019-20 year, we issued $37 million worth of tax anticipation notes. My point being is we will only issue the tax anticipation notes that we need to be able to make sure that we have the cash flow necessary to meet our operating expenses. These are short-term notes that are paid off within the school year. So they are issued in July typically, maybe sometimes that might leak into August, but they are paid off by May. And if we need additional dollars after the tax anticipation notes are paid or are satisfied, then we do have a line of credit with our banking institution as a backstop. So this is something that we do typically. We've done it every year that I've been here. So that's 15 years, and we did it prior to that as well. It is the most cost-effective way for us to be able to meet the cash flow needs of the district, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Let's see. Are there any questions? See any questions? I'm sorry to disappoint you, Jim. Maybe you could go right into your next one. Is that you or Heather? I'm sorry. Who has B?
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and guests. This one will be me.
Hello, me.
Each year, we need to statutorily and separate from our other budget, receive approval from the governing board to spend the insurance proceeds we receive during the upcoming school year. At this point, we're predicting that we will have a remaining balance of about $42,000 in our insurance proceeds account. Those are funds that are probably just waiting to be spent until folks come back to campus. And we project every year approximately $130,000 in revenue. So we expect that we would have no more than $172,000 in our insurance proceeds fund. And so at our next governing board meeting on July 14th, we will present a public hearing and ask for approval then during the regular meeting to spend up to $172,000 in insurance proceeds. We receive the insurance proceeds, of course, when we have an incident that happens on campus, such as vandalism or pipes breaking, and we receive the funds from Valley Schools. We deposit the funds, spend it to fix whatever broke, and I think that's the long and short of it.
Are there any questions for Ms. Mock? I see none. I don't see any. Thank you very much.
We have board goals, and I think it's superintendent goals or board goals? Board goals are on there. Dr. Tunis is unavailable at this time, so we'll push those to the 14th. Well, she'll push mine to the 14th as well, and I'll put it into a Friday update in a couple days here. What we did was we took your points that you gave us last time and modified them a little bit, made more options, and so we compressed the communication goals from parents and the staff into one and streamlined it around communication. So you'll see that in the Friday update. We'll do the board goals, which are basically staying the same from last year with a little bit of tweak. And then my goals after discussing them last time in executive session will be looking for approval on the 14th.
Okay, and I have, well, we did not get the suggestions for the board goal, so there will be suggestions on from Dr. Tunis, because she, as we talked about it, was trying to make sure that our goals are aligned, not only with the strategic plan, but with the superintendent. So with that, if anybody has any questions on that. I did. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Oh, okay. Were there any questions from anyone on that, on the board goals? Because if not, then we can go to our second discussion item, which would be high school graduations. Do we want to start with B? Could everybody raise their hand or something so I can see? All right, well, I don't see anything, so I'm going to ask Dr. Zurbach to explain or to go over the latest information. And I know that we all have questions, so I think it would be good to let him complete what he's saying. And if he does not answer our questions, we will then go that way. And we'll go in the order of one question per person so we can get them all out. So, Dr. Zurbach?
Sure, President Ordway, members of the board. So I know that there was much concern in the parent community as a result of Dysert's announcement, as they were one of the 3 remaining districts, and one of them including us, that were planning to move forward with the in-person graduation ceremonies scheduled to take place next week. So Dysert announced that they would no longer be moving forward with their ceremony, and they put that out. And so then, as a consequence, we know that there were many parents that were wondering about that. The reasons that they put forth, President Ordway, were, of course, the rise in the cases that we have been seeing both in the county and the state as a whole with COVID-19. And they also stated staff concerns as well, as some of the staff members no longer felt comfortable, felt safe attending that ceremony. And then the third reason was that I believe they polled either the parents or their students. Dr. Finch might know exactly which one they polled, but I believe from their poll, they saw that about half of the students, or the parents, were reporting that they were planning to attend that ceremony. So that really is the most recent as far as the change that occurred due to Dysert. And so there have been some additional then communications that have taken place. I did have a meeting with State Farm representatives today. They did want to know what our intentions were. They did express that they too were quite concerned due to the number of COVID cases that are going up. And so they had asked as far as what we were thinking. I did inform them that this was a discussion item tonight by the governing board, and that I would give them some follow-up as to what the board talked about this evening.
All right, go ahead. Okay. All right, if just to add to that, I think another piece, remember we work with the NEVIC crew. That's the North Valley Educational Consortium. Our other friends have also left and Darcy was the last in that group of our NEVIC group to exit the State Farm Stadium agreement. So the funds that we're going to expend this year can be moved forward. We learned that. So the money that we're going to expend this year, we won't lose it. That's the latest we had heard from them. Of course, you never know, but that's what they told us. And as Dr. Z had mentioned, we anticipate about 50% of our students to be in that camp of wanting to show up for graduation. We have received many emails, as the board members have mentioned earlier in the evening. Obviously, a lot of excitement to keep it and to be the last school district to do it, to save it. And so we're getting a lot of information there. Obviously, we're also getting folks that are also saying they do not want us to have it. But I would say in general, most of the emails early on were in favor of it. But we anticipate to match the same numbers that our other NEVIC friends, or the other NEVIC districts had put out at about 50% participation. Dr. Z did mention too about staff. We also think that will be a concern. The more we talk with our principals, they are now going to be scrambling to find staff help. And I do need staff to run this. I can't run this with parents in this environment. So I need DVUSD staffs who are responsible to our system to be able to help run it. And so I think the last bit of piece of the puzzle is the health department is really, and the governor's office are really the two pieces that are left out there. They may or may not allow us, even if we decide to go or not. So as you know, tonight I'm soliciting your feedback before we make this decision, what you're thinking as a board member from the community feedback that you received. But I think all of our concerns are all pretty much similar. So as soon as we get some more information from you, we'll again talk to State Farm and see what they say. And they might even trumpet for us where we can't go. So we'll wait and see what they do. But I need your feedback first before we make a good decision that is in the best interest of our students and staff health needs. That's about what I was thinking.
Okay, so one point at a time, because I know we have a lot of things that we want to get out. So, Ms. Tweedy, because you have a graduating senior, you get to go first. And then, so we'll get your first concern, and then we can discuss that amongst everybody at the table to see who has any kind of expertise on it. So, Darcy, if you want to go ahead.
I'm going to I'm going to ask a question, but then I will at one point want to say what I think about this. But I guess the thing that is really annoying me at all levels on both sides of politics and is the inconsistent logic with COVID and the just saying things to make people feel better. And so I'm going to start with this one. When you look at ratio in social distancing, we cannot social distance in our classrooms, but yet we're willing to have school. So if you look at the ratio square foot to the number of people, we're going to cram up to 32 kids in a classroom if the parents send them. There'll be no social distancing. It will be much more dangerous, but you and the NEVIC districts or any of the people canceling graduation are still going to have in-person school. We still have band and football all summer where we're saying they may not socially distance, but yet we want to take graduation away from parents we've already promised it to when it is possible a social distance. So how does that make sense? How is graduation less safe than these environments?
Is that to that?
You gotta turn the sound off.
Okay, hold on. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's a good question, Ms. Tweedy. One that we are asking every day. The difference is one of the differences is school is a month away still, and hopefully the cases will head south, head down in number. Right now they are ticking up. We're breaking records every day, so I think that's probably what's making more people nervous and why the schools are pulling out. But we will, I predict, be the last one standing in the entire state as far as doing a stadium or a closed graduation. So, yeah, you have a point well taken though. It's defies logic in some cases.
Okay. I will. Did she hear me? Ms. Frank, do you have something you want?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you a minute ago. So I have a question and a comment, and I feel very frustrated. I know, Dr. Finch, you, in private discussions that we've had, you've been far more optimistic along this whole pandemic road than I ever have been. Last May, and I'm just going to be honest, I think parents need to know where board members stand. When board members were asked, are you planning to attend graduation? I had to say no, not because I didn't want to attend graduations. I love seeing my former students graduate, but when I looked at how the governor opened the state, when we didn't meet CDC guidelines, and I looked at how we didn't do a phased approach and the data was ignored, I did not see that cases would be going down by July 1st. I expected that they would skyrocket up. So when you say to me, we hope cases are going to go down by August, I don't know what kind of wishful magical thinking is going on there. I don't see that that is going to happen. I wish it would. I don't see that it will. But again, I feel very frustrated, as Ms. Tweedy has expressed, because the governor said, oh, graduations and graduation parties are dangerous, and yet we just had a rally at a large church for 3,000 people who weren't wearing masks. So how is that acceptable, but State Farm Stadium, where people can socially distance out, is unacceptable? I don't see the logic there. And personally, I would not feel comfortable attending graduations. I completely understand staff who would not feel comfortable attending graduations. From a public health standpoint, I don't think it's a good idea, but looking from the viewpoint of our parents of graduating seniors, I can totally understand their frustration because this doesn't make sense. And, you know, what looking at the number of people who you expect to attend versus the capacity of State Farm Stadium, you know, what did we tell parents when we rescheduled? Was it that we would continue unless the governor or State Farm Stadium shut it down? Was that what they were, that's what I recall they were told. And I'm not hearing that State Farm Stadium has said, no, we can't allow you to have this event. So while from a public health standpoint, I don't think personally it's a good idea. I understand the frustration of our parents and our seniors who see this inconsistency from our government. So what I would say to those parents is don't email me that you're upset. Go email the governor who opened the state without meeting the guidelines and refused to take steps necessary to protect the citizens of Arizona. Email him, because that's why we're in this situation.
Mrs. Reed?
President Ordway.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I may, just to add in, again, there was a comment about what State Farm may or may not say. That too has been a little frustrating. Dr. Finch is aware, I let him know too, and he did already mention it. But that conversation that I had with the representatives did go both ways even today. So at the initial onset, they said that it would not proceed the event unless there was the approval from public health. So from the county, and so we talked about that some as far as how that would work, what the timeline would be for that. And then later on, the representative said that they could not give an exact timeline for that, and they could not commit to a timeline, and so then said it would basically it was uncertain at that point, and so that there was not a specific answer.
Thank you.
Dr. Zerbach, I realize this is a difficult situation for everybody. I mean, I do see everybody's point of view here. I don't want people to think I'm against their child having a graduation ceremony. I'm not. I just feel very frustrated with the way that the government, leaders of our state government have handled this. And I think it puts us in a very difficult situation. And I don't know what the right answer is, to be honest.
Okay, Ms. Reed?
Okay, I have a couple of questions first. So I know that our seniors picked up their tickets today. How many kids, do we know how many students picked up their tickets?
President Ordway, Ms. Reed, I don't know the exact number for each high school, but I can give you one sample. I believe that Dr. Miller from O'Connor, he let me know that he had about a half or 50% of the students had picked up their tickets.
Was today the only day that they were allowed to pick up their tickets, or are there additional days that are coming?
I know that the high schools had scheduled multiple days for that.
Okay, and then I know when Peoria announced that they were not going to do graduation, they talked about additional costs that State Farm was adding to their bill for additional cleaning, and that was one of the reasons why they decided to pull out of their graduation ceremony. Is that something that State Farm is adding additional dollars to what we had already agreed upon?
Ms. Reed, yes, that is correct. There were additional dollars or additional costs that have been added on since the start. Some of those costs are for additional cleaning that would be necessary, additional sanitizing, and then there also were some dollars that were necessary for some of the SRO police officer requirements and security requirements that had been added on.
Do you have those figures in front of you? Can you tell us what we were originally paying and then what additionally they've asked us to pay?
Ms. Reed, no, I do not have those exact numbers with me, but I can tell you, I believe it's within the range of somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000 extra.
Mrs. Reed, would it be okay if Mrs. O'Brien ask some questions now, please?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes, Dr. Finch or Dr. Zerbach, can you explain a little bit more about the staffing requirements for the graduation, please?
Sure, President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, I can certainly do that. So I've been working closely with Karen Meyer, much more closely than I ever have in the past as far as these graduations. And so Karen has a very detailed list of the various positions that need to be covered to make sure that the graduation runs smoothly. I talked with her today. I think we were roughly around, these are approximate numbers, Ms. O'Brien, but roughly around 25 to 30 folks, somewhere in 20 to 30 as far as staff members that need to help both on the ground floor and then help in other parts of the building in terms of where there's flow of students. And so they would be, again, helping direct students depending on where they're at, or if the students have to do some type of check-in, they would do that. Now, as far as safety procedures, we have been thinking about this for some time, and so we were looking to minimize any contact as much as we could, but that in general, that gives you an idea of about the number of persons that are needed for the graduation ceremony.
Mrs. O'Brien, did you have a follow-up to that?
I want to understand, I know that there's plenty of space for our students, guests, to be seated. my question is, what about the students? Because from having had experienced graduations in the past, it would be, practically impossible for our students to social distance in the room they normally gather in prior to graduation.
So Ms. O'Brien, that procedure that you are familiar with, and I was with you last year in the room, the gathering room, that room is not scheduled to be used this year because of the social distancing requirements. And so there would be a different entrance procedure for the students. They would come, and there's a section of the stadium that has been assigned for the students to sit before the procession would start. So they would not use the normal room that you're familiar with when they congregate before the ceremony starts.
And will the students be sitting during the actual ceremony more than 6 feet apart, or 6 feet, at least 6 feet apart?
Ms. O'Brien, yes.
Okay. I'm good for now, Mrs. Ordway.
Okay, so
President Ordway, I could also respond and have an additional update to Ms. Reed's question about the tickets. And so at O'Connor, with the sampling that I gave you from that school, so they had a total of 2 days that they did their ticket pickup. And so it was a 50% turnout for their 2 days. So that was the total for them.
Okay, so my question is, I'm going to have two. What are the requirements in our contract, if there are any, from State Farm for us to, how many adults do we have to supervise our kids, or is that our internal, is that what Karen Myers has, what we've decided on ourselves?
President Ordway, there are some requirements that are in there. I would need to look exactly at how it's worded because I do recall that there were some costs that were put in there that if we were not able to provide a certain number of staff members, then there would be a charge to us for them to provide some staff.
Okay.
Those exact pieces I would need to confer with either Ms. Mock or Ms. Meyer.
And to fill either or both of our requirements for employees, since our employees are not on contract anymore and we are not using volunteers, we have parents that are employees that have seniors, but I think we're talking about employees of the district. Can we require people that are not on contract to come in? I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to get people to work, to get enough people to work this, to work the graduations.
President Ordway, the system that we have right now is employees that have volunteered to be there. Of course, outside of our principals, our high school principals are on a 12-month contract, but the other folks that would be assisting us with the graduation ceremony, they would be volunteering.
Okay, and my last question for now. So say that Boulder Creek and O'Connor, and I think that also Mountain Ridge might have 300 if that was half of them. So how do we line them up to check in? Are we going to have time, like you get here at 5 o'clock in the morning, so you're not standing out in the heat? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of even 300 kids walking into the stadium to get into the stadium to stage. I mean, just that part alone.
Yeah, President Ordway, they have a process that they have outlined for that. Again, that process is different than how it has been in the past, where everyone has congregated in the staging room. And so this year, the students would come into their designated entrance from the parking lots and go directly to the part of the stadium that they have assigned for the students to see before the procession would start. So the students would come from the seats that have been designated again near the field. And then once the procession starts, they would come and then go to their seats that are on the field. So in essence, they would go directly to their seats.
I'm sorry, thank you. And Darcy, I'm sorry, you're right, you did. And so you get to go now.
Okay, I just want to put something out there. I don't even understand why we're having this conversation tonight, because when we were notifying parents as a district, what was said is we're having graduation, you're only going to have 2 tickets, these guidelines have to be adhered to. We can't make you promises if something changes with State Farm or the state. So if the state canceled graduation, our understanding as parents of graduates, we can't do anything about that as a district. We can't override the state of Arizona. If the State Farm said you're not welcome here, clearly we can't show up anyway. So that would be out of the district's concern. But when we made this commitment to parents, that's kind of what we said. Things change. We didn't say if Dysart surveys their parents and only 50% of them want to come, Deer Valley will cancel. That was never communicated with me, that we would be making decisions, or if our NEVEC partners don't do it, we'll have to cancel. That was not communicated. And parents are being treated, whether you think the graduation's okay or not, that should have been made when it was scheduled. It was, that decision was made when we scheduled this event. And if we weren't going to have a graduation, this should have been communicated a long time ago. I could tell you personally, my son's father has already brought airline tickets to come see my son graduate. And I could see, I mean, if Governor Ducey said, hey, we're back on level 1, but this is us deciding to take graduation away from our seniors because we've decided that we're the public health police. It's not our job. They have this allowed still. They can roll it back to level 1, but Ducey didn't. He went to a rally with no mask today and 6,000 people, but our kids can't graduate. It's ridiculous. It's unacceptable. Also, nobody's canceling football. Nobody's canceling band. Dr. K even mentioned we can't always social distance at these things. That's why they have to wear masks. But we do need to cancel an event where we could recognize our seniors and social distance. And all of the questions being asked about, well, how could they congregate here? This should have been decided before you told parents we were going to have a graduation. That didn't change. And I guess I'm really angry because as a board member, this is not how I treat the community. And the people who are concerned about graduation still need to attend. The great thing is it's voluntary. And I guess I'm really angry.
Mrs. Tweedy, I can hear your passion, but, and Mr. Zerbuck or Dr. Zerbuck, just wait a second. We're here to discuss what the current is. No one is here, as far as I know, to take anything away from anyone. We're discussing in public the current events and how we're going to go forward. So people are in the know of what's going on. So, and I know you're passionate because I know you have, I just know that you are for all your reasons. But I would appreciate it if you wouldn't say all of us. We're here discussing it so we can come to, so people can understand what's going on. Dr. Zerbuck, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy. Ms. Tweedy, you are indeed correct. We did not communicate to parents that our decision would be based upon the decision of other districts. I think the recent events, the fluidity of the situation with COVID-19, again, with our county and our state having record numbers as far as us not going in the direction that we wanted to go, in fact, going in the opposite direction, that certainly has given pause to many folks. And many of those folks include our staff members who are expressing concern. They're expressing some fear about attending that event when they know and they're reading in the news about the increase with the COVID concerns. And so I think that that's the primary reason right now as far as us talking about and revisiting this topic. As far as the procedures, Ms. Tweedy, those procedures were developed well in advance of what's happening in the past couple of days. And so those procedures as far as where the students would go when they come into the stadium, how they would process in, yes, those have been developed for 6 weeks now.
Ms. Frank?
So if you could just clarify, and if you've given us this information before, I apologize, but just clarify again, especially for the public, what is, and we'll just go with county public health, what is Maricopa County Public Health officially recommending at this time for gatherings the size of one of our graduations? What is their official recommendation?
President Orr and Ms. Frank, the official recommendation, of course, from the county putting out that they would not be recommending mass gatherings of this size.
Is that with or without masks? They're just simply not recommending mass gatherings at all, regardless of social distancing, regardless of mask usage.
Correct. And there was, I believe you're aware, Ms. Frank, as well, the guidance from, I believe it was ADE with the graduations as well, as far as not recommending them.
Thank you.
Mrs. Reed? I'm sorry, Ms. Frank, are you done?
Yep.
You were done, right? Ms. Frank?
Yeah, actually, but I do have one other. So they're not recommending them, but they're not prohibiting them.
Correct, Ms. Frank. As of this time right now, we have not heard from the governor's office that we could not continue.
So this is where, again, it puts us in a difficult spot because, as Ms. Tweedy has pointed out, this was promised to parents. So we're being told this is not recommended, but we're not being told it's prohibited. So if the county or the state were to say to us, this is prohibited, well, then it's prohibited. But all they're telling us is, hey, we recommend that you not do this. I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then that leaves it up to the local education agency to prohibit or not prohibit.
Ms. Frank, that would be correct at this very moment. Again, as stated earlier, the situation remains fluid. It is possible that State Farm could still say no.
Okay.
That was based on a conversation today, Ms. Frank, that I had with the representative saying that it is very possible that they could cancel.
So it's possible that we could decide, hey, we're going to go forward, and the day before, State Farm could say, no, you're not. We're canceling for you.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I do appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Mrs. Reed? Mrs. Reed? Trying to find Mrs. Reed, Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. As part of our current procedures, Dr. Zerbuck, will attendees and students or students' parents have to sign waivers to participate in the graduation?
I'm sorry, Ms. O'Brien, did you, just to clarify the question, did you say, do the students and the parents who would attend, do they have to sign a waiver?
Correct.
As far as the waiver, I do not recall. I don't think so, Ms. O'Brien, at this point. I don't think that they had to sign a waiver.
Okay. And then do we have, I know you said you talked to principals regarding the staffing. Do the principals have a fairly good idea about whether or not they are going to be short on staffing for the graduations, or we're not quite sure yet?
Ms. O'Brien, I think I did talk to the principals today. I think it would be a fair representation to say that the principals are concerned about the safety and welfare of their staff, as some of the staff members have indeed expressed their concerns. In terms of the exact number, I believe we still do have some staff members that are willing to come. That could change, right? Again, as we saw again today with the record high, if that continued, that perhaps that number of folks that are willing to come would continue to decline. But again, it would be fair to say that they have expressed their concern based off of the conversations they've had with their staff members.
And would we open these volunteer staff positions to non-high school employees? So if an employee that is at a K-8 or a K-6 wanted to volunteer at a graduation, they could?
I'm sorry, Ms. O'Brien, I'm having trouble hearing. Could you state that for me one more time?
If we had folks that want to, people that are staff at a K-8 or K-6 that would be willing to work the graduation, would that be acceptable?
Ms. O'Brien, yes.
Okay, are we, Mrs. Ordway, are we doing another round, or is this my last opportunity to speak?
If I could clarify, President Orr, if I could clarify that. I mean, as far as having volunteers, yes, Ms. O'Brien, there are folks outside of the high schools who are volunteering for this event. So for instance, there are some district folks who have volunteered. We would need some folks though, right, who are familiar with the students to help with the flow.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Reed?
Thanks. Dr. Zerbuck, I think it might be helpful if you could just do a brief kind of rundown of what graduation would look like for parents and for community members that are listening, so they understand. You know, when I was looking at social media and I was getting emails, there was the assumption that we have the entire stadium, that we would be seated all around the stadium. And so, you know, there's 60,000 square feet. So why couldn't we, you know, sit apart? And so I just want to clarify that. Do we have the entire stadium that we're going to be using, or is it the half stadium like normal? You know, what are the different processes and procedures that State Farm has in there? What can our parents expect if graduation goes on?
Certainly, Ms. Reed. So the format in terms of how the layout would proceed, it has been altered due to some of the social distancing requirements. And so it is not the entire stadium as far as our seating capacity. So it is a portion of the stadium. Again, as far as the exact portions, I would need to get with Karen Meyer, but it is not the entire stadium. Now, that said, the stadium has assigned sets of or pairs of 2 tickets, and those pairs are socially distanced inside the stadium, and so that would essentially again I would need to talk with Karen as far as the exact capacity, if you will, of the stadium. In terms of the actual ceremony, Ms. Reed, the actual ceremony would look very similar to what you are used to seeing. Outside of some of the traffic flow patterns would change with the procession, and then of course having students socially distance apart when they're on the floor. The other part to that I would add, of course, is the sanitation pieces, and so we do not have single graduations in day. We have multiple graduations that take place on a day. And so the amount of time that is needed to properly sanitize all of the areas, so not just where the graduates are, but where the attendees are in terms of the parent participants. So that takes time to clean and sanitize that large of a stadium. And so a part of that as well, it factors into the equation.
Mrs. Reed?
Yeah, one last question. Are all of our high school principals, are they all good with having graduation, with continuing?
Ms. Reed, I think, as I stated before, I think that it would be fair to say that they have concerns for their staff, right? So if we are asking, are they themselves as individuals wanting to have this event for their students? I think absolutely so. And that would be the same for me. I think that would be the same for Dr. Fitch. And so, because we recognize how important this event is for the students and their families. But again, I would say that I also understand when they tell me that their staff are communicating concerns to them, that I understand that as well. And so that's a tough spot for them to be in.
Dr. Finch, do you want to do a comment? And then I just have another question.
Yep, I like the questions. I like the thoughts. I like the discussion. As you know, there's a reason why Deer Valley's the last district standing. It's because I've been going against the waves, against the tide that is coming in. As Dr. Z mentioned, this is something that I feel is super important. To Ms. Tweedy's point and Ms. Frank's point, there's a lot of other factors outside of our control that could be part of the rise in COVID-19 throughout the state and throughout our county. There's a reason why I'm the last one, and it is that I feel it's important. So the reason we're having this discussion is to get the temperature of the board and to see if we are interested in continuing to paddle the boat upstream against all the other factors. So that's why we're doing it today. That's why I think the time to cancel was when Dysart went out as the last group. And now that we are standing by ourselves, now you're seeing the organized pressure from both sides to do or not to do, and that's where it's created a little more consternation for the community. But as you know, Dysart was not the first one out. It was all of our other districts that are like-sized, like us, Peoria, PV, Scottsdale. All of our big friends are all vacated. So that's why we're sitting here, to get the temperature of the board. And I appreciate the discussion, appreciate the questions. You have the same concerns that I do, but there's a reason why Deer Valley's last. It's because we wanted to hold on till the last second, and we still might. But I think I need to know kind of where the board was at. That's why we're doing this.
Okay, so did I? Okay. So, well, Tollison's out. I think everyone's out but us, and that's whatever, here or there, however you want to weigh it. So my concerns are, when you want to figure it out, I guess I'll start and then everyone else can go. If we don't have enough staff, we can't have the graduation. True or false? True or false, Dr. Beck?
Yes, I would say that is a true statement.
I'm sorry, Gary, could you say that again?
Yes, I believe President Ordway, that is a true statement.
And so that would be most likely for 5 high schools. And are we guaranteed that State Farm would actually have those people available to work? And you don't have to answer that now, because I don't think you would know that now. But these are just questions I have. So if we're required to have a certain amount of staff, and we can't do it either internally or externally, then you don't have it, right?
Correct.
So there's that. State Farm can at any moment, whether it's 10 minutes before graduation starts or never, or tomorrow, they can cancel it, correct?
Yes, that's correct, President Ordway.
Okay, so are we able to have, not releases, waivers such as we are doing for, I think, athletics and or marching band, maybe. I don't know if we're doing it for marching band. Are we able to do that?
That, President Ordway, I couldn't give you an answer yes or no with, because State Farm Stadium, they are in control of the rules. So if they decided that that is not something that they would have at the gates, right, because they're the ones that will be taking the tickets at the gates, then that would be something that they could do. So I couldn't tell you yes or no on that.
So it would be difficult to go backwards because I don't think all of the schools have the tickets gone yet, but most of the schools, they've already picked the tickets up. So in order for someone to come back and sign a waiver to go with the ticket, we can't. That would be a little bit difficult, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm looking at, just so you know, I'm looking at waivers would be great if that was something that's possible. Enough people, enough employees, enough staffing of our own staff would be great, because I don't know that strangers around the graduates really is what it's for. And I've been to, 12 graduations, to a lot of graduations, and part of the specialness is having your teachers, but okay, if we can't do that. And then letting people know if you decide to go forward, if that's a direction that we give you, that people know that it can be canceled at any second by State Farm and or the state of Arizona. And God forbid, I wouldn't think it would be the state of Arizona, because they're leaving all those cool decisions up to us. But anyway, just so those things would be made clear. So that's my piece. And I'm sure you have that all written down. So next would be Mrs. Tweedy, please.
I, of course, hope we're going to honor our commitment to our parents and go forward with this. And to the question of volunteers, I would like to request we send out an email and like one of the other board members suggested, to employees that aren't necessarily high school teachers, even classified, certified, but also offer professional responsibility hours that can go towards next year for volunteering under the 301, so that we could get more people to volunteer for this. And then if it becomes an issue with the volunteers, following up with State Farm, or deciding if we can have volunteers that have completed volunteer training with the district and have fingerprint clearance do some roles, unless there's a compelling reason that they could not. So those would be my thoughts. And I do agree with Ms. Ordway. The public needs to be aware it's our intent to go forward, but if the state or State Farm pulls the plug on it, that's beyond our control. We're doing everything we can to honor our commitment to our community.
Thank you, Ms. Tweedy. Mrs. Frank?
I think I've probably already gotten myself in enough trouble this evening. I'm not sure I need to invite any more. I just, from a science standpoint, because I was a science teacher, have a really hard time saying, let's go against public health recommendations. But having said that, I also completely understand the frustration of our parents. I understand Ms. Tweedy's point that this was promised to them. And it seems to be that this is being enforced very inconsistently in our state. I feel very frustrated as a board member that we've been given guidelines with the caveat when feasible, but most of the guidelines aren't feasible, and there's zero guidance for what to do because it's not feasible, and then there's no funding to make it feasible. So I don't know what direction to tell the district to go in, to be honest with you. I have very mixed feelings about this. I'm very, very concerned about the rising cases and the recommendations. that are coming to us, and I don't understand why they're recommendations and not mandates. You know, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a public health official. Okay, so I don't feel like the school board should be the ones making these decisions. If it's the will of the board to go forward with the graduation, then I know that the district will do everything possible to make it as safe as possible. But I have some real concerns. And I feel really terrible for the parents and the seniors who are being impacted by that. I don't want any parent watching this thinking that I don't feel that. I do.
Thank you. Mrs. Reed?
Well, I'm very frustrated also with everything that's going on. I feel like we do have a double standard that's set forth by our elected officials that are above us. And I do believe in local control and the governing board should make the best decisions for our district. However, I feel like in this case that the can has been continuously kicked down the street, and it's making us the bad guys, and that's very frustrating. I am very concerned about the cases that are rising. You know, my family all wears masks when we're out, and we have been doing so since March. You know, it's a real thing for us. At the same time, like I said before, there's a huge double standard with sports camps that are happening, and athletics that are happening, and rallies that are happening, and people not wearing masks, and so it's confusing to our parents and to our students when they see those different. So my suggestion is that I think that if people still want to have graduation, that we should do what we can to make sure the graduation goes on. I agree with waivers if that will make people feel more comfortable. And if they don't feel comfortable going to graduation, then you know it's not mandatory. They don't have to. And then the other option would be to let the seniors walk across the stage and have a even more, I don't want to say watered down graduation, but on a smaller scale, and don't allow any guests in there, and have it live streamed, because to me, letting the seniors walk across the stage and have their 15 seconds of celebratory congratulations across the stage would be better than nothing. So those are my thoughts.
Julie, when you said walk across the stage, are you talking about their individual campus stages? I just want to clarify. To me, it doesn't matter if we can do it at the stadium. If that would make it feel more normal, and we already have that money, then that's fine. If we need to really dial it down and have it, they can walk across their auditorium stage, and that would be fine with me too. But I think it's important that they can do something. We missed the opportunity for them to do anything, and I know that some of the other districts had their drive-by celebrations, and our schools did not really celebrate because we thought we were doing more of an in-person celebration. Okay, I know that there were some schools that did that, but point well taken. Mrs. O'Brien?
Thank you, and I appreciate you answering all of our questions, Dr. Zurbach, tonight. I too share frustration from what I feel like is lack of leadership in outside of our district. And I empathize with parents who want to see their students graduate, students who want to see that graduate or participate in those ceremonies. The caveat I would add to some of the board members who said if the district is going to proceed forward, that parents understand in bold, highlighted, underlined, however you want to all caps put it, is that not just if State Farm or the state were to decide, I would say that could also include Maricopa County or potentially Glendale, because those are the other municipalities that this graduation is located in. And I think given where we are right now with the governor, they would have they could have the option to make decisions even more locally than at the state level. So if we proceed forward, and I understand the parents, not just that emailed us, but who maybe didn't, as well as the students. And I appreciate the science and the parents who did email and say, please cancel it. This is a crummy situation. I believe our district thought that our numbers would continue to stay either where they're at, not grow like they are. I would like to give a shout out, though, to a graduating senior from Mountain Ridge who wrote an email tonight that I think was probably the most mature email of all the emails I received, where she does ask that we allow them to walk across that stage and celebrate with their families. But she also extends the grace that saying that she understands if it has to be canceled because she does not want to be selfish and does not want to harm anyone else. And furthermore, she thanked all of us for the work we do and how important it is. So I really want to thank Emma for sending her email because it was a bright star in all the emails that we got, or that I got at least in the last 2 days. So thank you, Emma, for that. I will differ on one point I think, from Mrs. Reed is that I think that if the parents can't be there, then I don't know that live stream is really the same as them having their 2 or 4 guests there. So please do what you can to do to deliver on our promise, but certainly understand. And finally, the last thing I will say, though, is I am concerned about staff. I know that we need staff, and if we don't have enough staff, that is another caveat to making this happen. I know the parents, most of the emails I received talked about parents and students, and most of them don't understand the staffing requirement that is necessary to make graduation happen. So I do worry about our staff and hope that we will make sure that we can you'll take that into account, I know, when you make this decision. So thank you all for listening to me.
All right, thank you. And I again, as the pandemic happens, there are a lot of things that didn't happen, none of which I miss going to all the things, and obviously the seniors did more than I did, as well as their parents and guardians and friends. It is nothing that we're stringing you along. We're not trying to take it away from you. What we're trying to do is work so you can have what we can make available in a safe way, knowing that all of the things that the 5 of us have said is because we do take our positions very seriously and we want what's best for our students. Ms. Frank had some reluctance. I have some reluctance, and I think in the back of everyone said we have reluctance because we're not given clear direction by our state and local governments that do have the health officials and the experts at their fingertips, and they kind of pushed it all the way down here. We don't think you should do it, but we're not going to tell you can't. So we've come and given you what we have, and we know that the direction that and the way that our cabinet works, they'll come up with what they can. So all of the parents that are listening, please remember that there are things that we have to be able to meet in order to have this continue to be a go. And one of the biggest things is the staffing. So, and I don't believe that that we are able to use volunteers, whether they're volunteer trained or not. I think I heard that we must use employees of our district. So I'm going to leave it there. Wrapped it up. Raise your hand, put a thumb up if I haven't, but I think we could end the meeting on a good note. Yes?
How about I move to adjourn?
How about I love you even more than I did before you said that? All right. May I
I'll
second?
second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. 5. Unless Ms. Tweedy's holding out on adjourning. Yes. Can we wait for Dr. Finch to make one more comment and then we can go?
Sorry about that.
What? Oh, gosh. Why can't I remember that?
Okay. All right, I just wanted to kind of fill you in on the process. Today is Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so what will probably happen is we'll make some more phone calls tomorrow, get more information and weigh all the variables that you gave us. And we'll be talking obviously to State Farm, finding out what their position is, if it has changed overnight, which it may have. And then by the Thursday update, we should be able to give you an answer. And then by then it's all in or all no go for sure, because we're running out of time. So that gives us a couple days to try to scramble and fill the cracks if we have to, if we haven't already been overridden by state or local or State Farm. So that's the general timeline for announcement, Wednesday or Thursday at the latest.
Just to clear that up, that would be an announcement for the board and or the parents or.
Yep. Ms. Ordway said that'll be announcement for everyone. That'll be announcement to the whole community. So we will, announce it either way before the end of Thursday.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much and good night.
Appreciate it. Have a good night.